My dear friends, greetings in the Eucharistic Lord and welcome back to another episode on the light of the Eucharistic faith. Thanks to the Amazing Grace team for the wonderful ministries they are engaged in, very especially giving to this series recognition, appreciation and widespread publicity. Thank you. Today I have titled this episode as Basic Steps of the First Passover. Actually, there are 5 steps. So we would want to have them during this session. Jesus was a Jew. He was born of a Jewish family, received the Jewish sign of circumcision, and he also grew up in a Jewish town in Galilee. As a young Jew, he studied the Torah, he celebrated feasts and holy days, and he went on pilgrimages to the Jewish temple. When he was 30 years old, he preached in the Jewish synagogues, and at the age of 33, he celebrated the Jewish Passover, which became his Last Supper. So, in order to understand his action at the Last Supper, it is important first to study the shape of the Passover in Scripture itself. Although the Passover is mentioned numerous times in the passages of the Bible, I think the most important description is found in Exodus chapter 12. This account not only tells us the story of what happened on the night of the first Passover, but it also gives a detailed description, instruction for how the people of Israel were supposed to keep the feast. I call it the original Passover, the first Passover. So during this reflection, dear friends, let us refresh our memories and review the 5 basic steps of the first Passover as laid down in the Old Testament. Step 1. Choose an unblemished male lamb. Choose an unblemished male lamb. The first step in the Passover was to choose an unblemished male lamb, which was supposed to be a year old, 1 year old. And as God says to Moses regarding the Passover, I quote, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they shall take a lamb according to their fathers' houses, a lamb for a household. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month." Unquote. Exodus chapter 12 verses 1 to 6. So it is important also here to note that the Passover lamb is explicitly required to be a male, 1 year old. And thirdly, it was supposed to be unblemished. When it is said unblemished, it could not be just any lamb. It had to be free of defects, any defects. It could not be wounded, maimed, or lame, or diseased, but it had to be perfect. So, step 2, sacrifice the lamb. So, the second step was for the father of the household. He was to sacrifice the lamb. So, the sacrifice took place on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, in the springtime. You can say like in the month of March or April. As God says to Moses, I quote, "You shall keep the lamb until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs in the evenings." Exodus chapter 12 verse 6. So during the sacrifice of the lamb, it was extremely important that not a single bone of the lamb be broken. I quote, "You shall not break a bone of it." Exodus chapter 12 verse 46. In other words, dear friends, we spoke about the unblemished lamb, and it has to be sacrificed whole and without marring its perfection in any way. Step 3. Spread the blood of the lamb. So the third step was to spread the blood of the lamb on the so-called the entryways, the doorposts of the homes of all the Israelites. And that was a visible sign of the sacrifice that had been performed. I quote, "Then they shall take some of the blood of the lamb and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they shall eat them." Exodus chapter 12 verse 7. Again in the scripture we hear, I quote, "Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, Select lambs for yourselves according to your families and kill the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood which is in the basin, and touch the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood which is in the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. For the Lord will pass through to slay the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to slay you." Unquote. Exodus chapter 12 verses 21 to 23. Here also you would have observed the real meaning of Passover. The angel of the Lord passing over the houses of Israel without doing any harm, without destroying them, and then destroying the people, destroying the Egyptians. So that's the meaning of Passover, passing over. Step 4. Eat the flesh of the lamb. The 4th step of the sacrifice was to eat the flesh of the lamb. After the lamb had been killed and its blood poured out and spread upon the entries of the homes, the people would then eat the lamb. I quote, "They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of its raw or boiled with water, but roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. And you shall not allow it to remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it, your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast." Unquote. Exodus chapter 12 verses 8 to 12. Again, while this part of the Passover is sometimes overshadowed by the dramatic and memorable act of spreading the blood, it was in fact equally important. For example, if a certain Israelite family did not particularly care for the taste of lamb, what would have happened? If they took the lamb, sacrificed the lamb, spread the blood of the lamb, but did not eat the lamb, what would have been the result? Well, the book of Exodus does not say, but it is good guess that when they awoke the next morning, their firstborn son would be dead. For as any ancient Jew would have known, the Passover sacrifice was not completed by the death of the lamb, by the spreading of the blood, but by eating its flesh. 5 times the Bible states that they must eat the lamb. 5 times it emphasizes the sacrificial meal. Step 5, the last one, the 5th and the final step, was by no means the least significant. From the very beginning, the Passover sacrifice was not simply meant to be a one-time feast. Instead, it was designated as a memorial day, an annual celebration that was to be kept by people forever. I quote, "This day shall be for you a day of remembrance, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall observe it as an ordinance forever." Unquote. Exodus chapter 12, verse 14. You shall observe this rite as an ordinance for you and your sons forever. So as it is said, it is very important to record the memorial dimension of the Passover. So, the Passover liturgy was to be repeated every year in the spring. On the 14th day of the month of Nisan, the people were to celebrate this day of remembrance in honor of the salvation they had been won. The salvation they have received, salvation that was offered to them by God. So this command to renew the sacrifice every year shows that for ancient Israel, Passover was not just like, say, for example, a one-time activity, one-time event. It did not happen once and then forget about it. It passes away. No. But then the Passover was to be observed forever until the end of time. So, dear friends, to sum up what we have seen so far, the Old Testament itself, very especially with particular reference to Exodus, we see that there are 5 basic steps of the ancient Passover. To choose an unblemished male lamb, sacrifice the lamb, spread the blood of the lamb on the home as a sign of the sacrifice, eat the flesh of the lamb, and every year, finally, to keep the Passover as a day of remembrance of the Exodus forever. So this is the Passover of the Exodus from Egypt. This is the biblical shape of the Passover liturgy with which every ancient Israel would have been familiar through reading the scriptures. And by celebrating it, not only you read the scripture, but then you do it annually, every year. However, dear friends, the first Passover was not identical to the Jewish Passover as celebrated at the time of Jesus, because by the 1st century AD, the Jewish feast of Passover had developed. Things have been altered. So there are similarities and differences between the original Passover and the Passover that was celebrated by Jesus. So I think it would be quite interesting to look at these differences and similarities so that we can further understand the action of Jesus at the Last Supper. What was Jesus trying to do in its proper context? So in our next episodes, I look forward sharing those reflections on Passover, very especially during the time of Jesus. So dear friends, we have completed 4 episodes before, and today's one was the 5th one. If you would like to have access to those episodes, please log on to the following link. You will see it on the screen. In this way, you will not miss, because these are series that are coming one after the other to deepen our catechism and also the light of faith. So I invite you to log on and watch those series also. Goodbye and God bless. Thank you.